Hey, Reset listeners, I've got something super special for you. So, it's been a year of us all being stuck inside, and I think it is not a better time to reset, which is why I am so excited to announce a partnership with the Miraval Berkshires, which is a one-of-a-kind spa in Lenox, Massachusetts. Basically, we're launching the Reset Weekend. April 30th to May 2nd, we're creating an amazing weekend where you can go, relax, get spa treatments, hike, sit by the pool, get every massage you could ever dream of in a one-of-a-kind, amazing space. I had the honor of going to this space back last summer, and it fueled my soul. And I think once you spend a weekend at Miraval, you're going to love it. So I'd love for you to join me on April 30th to May the 2nd for a Reset Weekend. Details are in the show notes, and come on through and check out Miraval Berkshires.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Munoz, CEO of the Cultural Communications Agency, D-Flash. Each episode, I bring on a different business leader who's doing game-changing work. And this episode is no different. I'm so excited to have Dr. Angela Jackson, who's the managing partner of the Future of Work Fund at New Profit. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. I'm excited to get started. Take a listen. Hey, Angela, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
It's a good Tuesday, so can't complain at all. The way the podcast works, the first question always remains the same, and always fascinated by the answers. And I am excited to see what yours will be. So, Angela, what was your first job?
So my first job, I would say one was working. Well, there's two. The first one was I was an entrepreneur. I ran a lemonade stand when I was about 10 years old. And there was some construction workers who were like doing some work on a street that I lived on. I grew up outside of Chicago. And as they were doing construction, I had my stand and I was charging like maybe 50 cents for a glass. And so one of the guys comes up and he says, I'll give you $20 for unlimited refills. And I was like, oh my God, that's a lot of money. And it was my first lesson in entrepreneurship because actually it was not a lot of money.
No, it wasn't.
5 hours later, right, of unlimited lemonade. So that was like kind of my first job. And I think the second kind of job where I worked for someone else, I was a telemarketer and I was making appointments for water filters. And so basically I was the person who would look through a directory of numbers, call you and say, hey, we have this new great water filter. Would you like to try it? And every time I made an appointment, I got a bonus $5.
Just $5? Wow. Okay. Well, I get it. It was good.
It was good back then. I was 12. So I started working.
Wow. Okay. You left out the important part there, Angela, because at 12, that could add up very quickly. That's a lot of candy.
Yeah. It's a lot of candy.
Like that. Hey, look, that's pretty cool. But it did teach you how to talk to people, and getting a reward when you actually did a great job. So these are things that come in handy throughout our careers.
Absolutely. And can I tell you, sales has been a through line from what I've always done, right? And so I started my career early on working in sales and marketing in the entertainment industry, and then went on to technology working for Nokia. And really those communication skills and just being kind of fearless about making an ask they just voted really well for me throughout my career.
Yeah, so that was a nice segue into my next question. So how did we get from being an awesome telemarketer at age 12, which I think is illegal, but neither here nor there, to where you are today? What's that career journey been like?
It's been an interesting one with twists and turns. So I went to undergraduate and did my degree in journalism, and I thought I was going to be the next Oprah Winfrey. She was really big in Chicago at that time, and of course, nationally now. And I went to journalism school, and I was working. One of my early first jobs was literally working as a general assignment reporter. And again, using those same kind of communication skills, talking to people, understanding their story, and then, reporting that back out to viewers. When I did my first job after that, it was in sales and marketing at Sony Pictures. And again, it was this through line of like really understanding people's stories, why they buy products, why they don't buy products. And that led me to working internationally with Nokia, which was fascinating for me being, a girl from the Midwest. I grew up in a town that was 45 minutes outside of Chicago. So the fact that this job with Nokia, I was leading teams in Asia and also in Europe, it was a job that I could have never imagined. But if I look back on it now, like with hindsight, I could see like even from that telemarketing job, being able to tell a story, able to understand people and how to actually tell a compelling story back to them really led to that job. And then what I learned when I was at Nokia doing marketing and sales internationally was like really how to transact across borders and also across, perceived differences where, many times there's really not differences there.
Awesome. So you skipped about. All right. So sales is your thing. And so how do we get to this current gig that we're at?
Yeah, the current gig stemmed from once I left Nokia, I founded my first organization called Global Language Project. And that was interesting for me is because, based on my work, internationally at Nokia, I was like, everyone needs to start learning about other cultures and languages earlier in life because the job I had at Nokia was like so far different than how I had grown up. So as background, I was raised by my grandparents. Both of them were, blue collar workers. My grandfather worked at a local Chrysler factory. And it really, impacted my, outlook on life, right? So I didn't know the type of job that I had at Nokia was even possible. Like it was not even in the realm of my possibility. And what I wanted to do with the organization I founded, Global Language Project, was like to start with children at their earliest ages, really informing them about the world and making sure that they knew that the opportunities were bigger than what's provided in like a 5-block radius around your home. And so
Exactly.
that organization, we partnered with school districts nationwide to create world language and culture programs. And really it was centered on students learning a second and many times a third language starting when they're in kindergarten. And for me doing that, I was able to raise for that organization. It was a social enterprise. I was able to raise somewhere around, $10 million in philanthropic funding. I also started.
That's a small amount of money, just a teeny tiny little amount of money.
Yeah,
a little bit.
But for me, it was raising the money, also created products that we sold, curriculum that we sold to districts nationwide and internationally too, that brought in revenue. But the thing about the raising money from philanthropy and also impact investors, I never raised from someone who looked like me. Like I never sat across from a Black person, a woman of color that I was asking these funds to. So I found myself explaining why global education.
This was necessary, right?
It was necessary, right? And so I just thought going on the other side now that I'm in an investor seat, really thought about like how I could take what I've learned as an operator and really apply that to being an investor, one, two, but investing with an equity lens, right? So when I didn't know when I founded Global Language Project that I was doing anything radical by being one, a woman, and two, a woman of color. Like I didn't know about the capital access gaps, right, for women and women of color. And so once I found out those things, right, we say 10 million, not a small number, but when I look at some of my counterparts who are white men, they were like raising multiples of that amount, right? And at similar stage organizations. And so really what I wanted to be on the other side was like an advocate for entrepreneurs who are solving problems that they see in their communities and that they know really personally, right? It's based on their lived experience and that they could see someone who looks like them on the other side of the table.
Awesome. And it's so timely because I think right at this moment, there's all these different conversations about the equity gap and why can't people of color get funded. And a lot of times because all my friends who are trying to raise money are like, they don't get it. And it takes me 10 minutes to explain it's like why this actually makes sense, why there's actually a marketplace for this. And so the more investors, especially women of color who are there on the other side of the table, I think a lot of those conversations will be a lot easier to be had. And then more investments will be made successfully. and helping these companies grow.
Absolutely. Like I made an investment in this company called Maven.
Yeah,
And well, you know Maven, right? They're
of
amazing.
course.
So
I'm sitting with my lovely weave right now.
thanks
So,
to the Sean and company, right? But like a lot of investors missed out on that market, right? Because a lot of them are, white men. And so they may not understand what the hair market is, right? Or the hair extension market. That's one. Two, a lot of investors didn't get where he was looking at a double bottom line. His platform also enables hairstylists to make more income, right? Direct income based on the products that they're buying. And so that's why it was attractive to me as an investor. And I got it immediately, right? Like what he was
right.
trying to for women, that one, that there was a market out there. Two, I really got that he's trying to like really empower these stylists and cut out some of these middlemen who are taking a lot of their profits, right? And so I was like, yes, immediately. But there's several people several investors, many investors who passed on that deal who look back now and was like, I missed it. Like I was talking to one the other day and was like, I didn't get it. I'm a bald head guy, didn't even think that this was a thing, but it is a thing and they're proving it out.
Well, that's the thing. It's funny because there's Maven and then there's Squire, which everyone which loads of investors got. And it was, reinventing how to facilitate payments for barbershops. And the two great guys who founded that, and didn't come from that industry, but built a really awesome platform and were able to not only get funded but get funded, and now they're basically one of the first Black unicorns. So it takes more companies coming into the space, more investors of color, sort of like making the smart bets, because not everyone needs another fitness app. Like solve some of the problems that are happening right now, and you can make tons of money. Like I think a lot of times we hear a lot of this as, well, we're doing charity for these like founders of color, and like they may not have the experience. I'm like, but you'll happily give a founder who went to Stanford $10 million to blow on a really ridiculous idea that has no use in the real world, but like here's someone coming on with a game-changing like size inclusivity app, and you're like, that there's no marketplace for that. So it's really important at this moment for more of you to exist, Angela.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because it's beyond like when I invest at New Profit, it's beyond like this is the charitable thing to do or this is the moral thing to do. Like we really see, we call them, proximate founders. And you can also think of it as like founder market fit. Like they have some like shared lived experience with the problem that they're solving. We see that they're just bringing unique like insights and solutions to the table, right? To really address a problem that they've seen in their community. And I think that's what a lot of investors don't get. And because of it, right, we see that they are having outsized returns. And so some of these founders are the best kept secret. And what we're hoping to do at New Profit, where we've made a public commitment that 50% of our investments are going to be in founders of color, because like we believe in impact. And we think that the way that some of these founders are, and the way that we're using our criteria, that they are community first, right? They're getting their data from the community and they're solving a social problem with a market solution, which is really exciting because then it becomes sustainable.
Well, that's the key. So, what for you has been the most sort of eye-opening experience as an investor?
The biggest one is it's two sides. One is, and I just want to preface this, in addition to investing at New Profit, I also am an active angel investor. And a lot of it, when I got into the market, especially, angel investing, I really was very specific that I wanted to like invest in founders of color because I knew about the capital access gap. And so really what I wanted to do, what's been startling to me is that there is this, what I would call revenue to reputation gap for a lot of founders. So there's a ton of founders of color that you will see out there that, have their MVPs that are post product that actually have sales that are coming in, but that still has not translated to further investments for them. And, there's two entrepreneurs I have in mind, they've been through incubators and accelerators that are supposed to be the gold star, right? It gives them the kind of stamp of approval, like Techstars, for example. Even though they've had those experiences, money hasn't followed. And so for me, I have been really wanting to dig in and say, does it take a new type of investor, right? How do we open up beyond, the 1,000+ VCs there are? How do we open up different access to capital? I'm thinking really deeply about, New Profit is a venture philanthropy firm that, depending on the entrepreneur, there might be times that an entrepreneur may need grant funding. And we see our grant funding as that friends and family money that some entrepreneurs just don't have. And then there's, this continuum where you need equity investments too. But like, how do we really surround a founder and meet them where they are in terms of their capital needs?
Yeah, it's, I have so many people I could send your way, Angela.
I mean, send them, because that's the other thing I try to do, even if they're not a fit for my portfolio. Like, I believe strongly in, like, I have a lot of like very close other VC connections in introducing people, because we know the warm introduction is real, right? That's going to be an email that's answered quicker than a cold email that someone's sending.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like I was saying, like, I sit in this really unusual seat whereby, like, I see lots of startups, I know lots of VCs, I work with brands direct, and oftentimes brands are like, find me something interesting that we can use, and like, we will find it. And so we get to see a lot of different things, and I'm always, it's interesting. Like, I see people who go through, like, I've been to this many accelerator, I've won this many pitch competitions, and I'm looking at this idea, I'm like, wow, awesome, like, makes sense to me. And then I'll see something else. Well, oh, we got our Series A. We raised $25 million. I'm like, I don't even get what? Who needs this? And so, and you can guess what those folks look like. And I think it's one, the access gap. It's two, it's letting folks understand that there is so much money to be made, especially if you invest in Black women.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason I'm on the board of Black Women Talk Tech. Because, from day one, when I was the host, when it was 35 people in a room in Google, and they had an overflow of 200 some odd people who wanted to join in for the very first time when they were doing this, to now it being like 5,000 people in 5 years, that there are amazing people out there doing phenomenal work. And if you make the programs interesting and accessible for them, they will show up and they will show out in ways that will make everybody successful. So,
And can I just say, I love them. And let me tell you even deeper the part of like the network and the community that they've built. So for example, Lauren Washington, one of the co-founders, she was on my first board from one of my first organizations, Global Language Project, right? And so this is like 10 years ago. And now, like, as I'm doing this work with the future of work at New Profit, like, I went to Black Tech, I contacted her and was like, we're putting out this challenge. We're going to give away $6 million for entrepreneurs who are thinking about a more equitable future of work and who are coming up with solutions. I was like, let's partner. And we partner with Black Women Talk Tech to do some sessions to let people know how they could apply, how they could get this grant funding and also be eligible, right, for follow-on equity funding. But it's really built on those relationships. I think, Lauren supported me when my idea was like in its nascent phase when I was starting an organization. And then fast forward, now that I'm on the investing side, I'm able to invest in Black Women Talk Tech. I'm also able to invest, in her latest startup funder. I'm in another, angel investor network with Regina. So it's really about, and how do we like amplify and activate these ecosystems? And Laura, that's really why I love what you're doing, right? Because it's not just one lane. Like, it's going to take us to play in many lanes to really like have the success that we want to have for like the culture and for Black women.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's part of the reason why I did 29 Days of Magic, which was actually 32 days of 39 interviews, because not only as I am intellectually curious about meeting more and more and more and more and more amazing Black women, but I also wanted to prove a point that, like, there is awesomeness in every industry, and there are Black women in every one of these industries. And if you take 5 seconds, you can find them. And when you listen to their stories, you're like, wait a second, why am I not working with this person? And so, that was the reason that I did 29 Days of Magic. And, folks have asked me like, oh, since you just interviewed all of Black women, you're not going to interview any more Black women for the rest of the year. And I'm like, no, like, it will continue. because there's an endless supply of really amazing, dope Black women like yourself who are
Yeah.
part, who, we just want to share this knowledge, and we have such a wide plethora of people who listen. It's like, yeah, this is where you can find great folks.
Yeah.
Um, so at the new profit, what's sort of the focus of the fund?
Yeah, so it's called the Inclusive Future Fund. And really what we're focusing on two areas. One is what we call an inclusive future of work. So really focusing on like who's being left out of the future of work conversations. When we talk about it, the future of work can mean many things to many people, depending on where they're entering the conversation. But we like to think about like the 71 million like US residents who don't have a 4-year degree, and really thinking about who's creating solutions for them to, one, identify these jobs that are connected to the future of work, two, to like actually upskill and train for them. And then the third, thinking about what I like to call the social determinants of work, similar to like the social determinants of health. What are the things that need to be true for a person to actually be in a mindset to upskill? And just to make that a bit more clear, it's like what we've seen with what people call the she session right now. Like,
Hmm.
we know women's unpaid labor prevents us from a lot of promotions, taking on extra work, et cetera. And so like now we know, and we have this kind of, I think, national awareness that, it's hard to do your job, to try to take a class and Zoom school your kids, right? And so we're also looking at innovations in like childcare. We're looking at innovations in transportation, also like innovations in like fintech. So how do you pay for these things? Because a lot of these programs and boot camps are like predicated on, you can learn these skills of the future, but you need to pay for them, right? And so that's a barrier to many people who aren't earning a living wage today. It's a trade-off that they need to make. And so we just want to make learning, to de-risk that for them, right? And bring down some of the barriers that they might have.
That's awesome and so necessary. Oh my goodness, so necessary. Um, it's funny, like you mentioned the X Prize, and I've been recently doing some work with them. See, you can find me everywhere. um, and I would love for you to share about what you're doing with the X Prize, because I recently like started working with them and had no idea the wide breadth of the amazing work that they can do using these challenges. Um, so it'd be great for you to share what challenge that you guys are have put up and how people can learn about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the area that I lead is this at New Prop is a $15 million Future of Work Global Fund. And what we invest in is entrepreneurs and companies who are developing like innovative technology solutions, right, to upskill low income and entry level workers at scale. Under that fund is the Future of Work Grand Challenge. And that's the partnership that we did with not only X Prize, but with MIT Solves. And so it's a $6 million challenge that's powered by, both MIT and X Prize, and it's designed to rapidly reskill 25,000 workers who've been displaced by COVID into living wage jobs in the 24 months. So we're trying to prove out that you can actually cut the time to train for people so they can get into these higher paid, more lucrative jobs that are tied to the future of work. And with X Prize, we have the Rapid Reskilling Challenge. And what we want to do is help workers like overcome like the numerous systemic problems and like societal barriers to learning, to progress and mobility. And while doing that, we want to reduce the time that it takes to train for and land higher wage jobs. And what we're doing there is interesting. We had, many entrepreneurs who apply, but we were able to like narrow that down to 10 solutions that we're actually going to validate. So we're not giving the money away just because someone has an idea. We actually want to see what is the impact that they're having on a community and on a job seeker. And so we've paired each solution with job centers in 6 cities. Where they will actually validate, and the winners will be selected by how many people are actually able to train and place workers in living wage jobs at the end of the challenge. And then the second one that we're doing with MIT Solves is called the Reimagining Pathways to Employment. And it's a 6-month competition. And what we're trying to do is like find and support the most promising solutions to help workers assess their skills, to find high growth jobs, to match, and also get that placement support. And really, we're very clear, like equity has been like front and center with this Future of Work Grand Challenge. And it's been embedded in like the core of the process. and workers, like having real people who are experiencing the problem. Like we had them as judges. They helped us select the winners, the 15 solutions that we're piloting. And last week, we unveiled for the first time the combined 15 solutions from both challenges that are going into this kind of on the ground validation phase.
Awesome. And we're going to put all this in the show notes for folks to find out, because it's just absolutely necessary and amazingly wonderful. Like, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. So, obviously, your boss, shot caller, mover and shaker, making things happen. Talk to me about a time when you were like, I am never going to get through this challenge. And then you did.
Yeah, well, there's been so many, but I will start, just from this kind of funder, like operator perspective. When I was launching Global Language Project and had launched it, a lot of people who haven't been entrepreneurs really don't understand the struggle, right? Because when you're building a company, not only you're trying to reach scale and reach your goals, and for us, it was like getting these programs out to more students, more schools, and scaling the curriculum, but you're also like responsible for your staff, and you're out there also fundraising at the same time. And so there came a time, I think it was probably 3 years in, where we were doing well. We were in probably 20 or 30 schools were using our program and curriculum. We had revenue coming in. But when you're working with districts, like when you get paid, it's kind of up in the air, right? And it's not like you can force someone when you're a smaller organization to pay you sooner.
Right.
And so,
right. Oh, yes.
Yeah. There came a time. I know it came a time when I was like, I think we may have to close. Like, I can't afford to pay the staff. And for me, it was like, and I told you about my background growing up with my grandparents working in a family. It's been very important to me to pay my staff a living wage, right? More than a living wage, a competitive wage. We were based in New York City. And so, what New York wages are. And I can tell you, it became a dark time when I felt like we couldn't be competitive in terms of our salary, our benefits. And then the trade-off was like that we may have to close the organization. And it pushed me as a leader, because I was a solo founder, which, hashtag I don't recommend, because it's a lot for one person to carry. But it was a time where I just had to be very transparent with my staff about where we were, right? And what the problems we were facing. And what was a dark time became a very bright time, because I saw my team lean in and saw the belief that they had in the organization. So they weren't just doing this for a paycheck. They really believed in like the mission and our North Star. And we were able to weather that storm. And like literally, I think it was December, I was thinking we may have to close. I think it was February, we got confirmation that we were going to get a $2 million investment. And so I would just say, like, it was darkest days, December, bright and sunny by February. And in between, it was a little scary and harrowing, but like we were able to make it through.
Oh, we have been there. And then when you make it through, you're like, oh, okay. On to the next thing.
The next thing, but can I tell you, entrepreneurship is not for the faint at heart, right?
You have to be an entrepreneur, not a wantrepreneur.
Yeah. I know it. And that's why I have, now that I'm leading the fund and making investments, like I try to work shoulder to shoulder with the folks, the entrepreneurs that we're investing in, because I know the journey that they're going through, right? And so it takes a lot of courage. Every founder that I've worked with, they've had that same moment that I told you about, right? How are you going to meet payroll? And then, something breaks open. And so like I have a lot of empathy when it comes to that. And we try to think of ourselves as a very like founder friendly firm and really working shoulder to shoulder with them.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thinking about how far you've come and this place that you're in right now, what do you think you'd tell 25-year-old Angela?
Wow. I would tell, 25-year-old Angela was a risk taker. I just want to let you know. After I graduated, I was working that first job I told you for the TV station, and I quit and like packed everything in my truck and moved to California, moved from Illinois to California because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't like that first job being a reporter. It was a grind and 12 hours a day and I was paid $75 a day. It wasn't glamorous at all. And I went there and I bet on myself. Like I've always been willing to bet on myself. And I would tell my younger self, like, that's going to be your secret sauce. There are a lot of people who thought, when I quit that first job at the television station, it was seemingly glamorous because I was on air in Illinois. My grandparents could see me, relatives, friends I went to school with, high school with. But I just felt like there was more for me to do. And there's been these moments throughout my life, even when I was working at Nokia, I was making more money in that private sector than I ever, imagined I would make. And again, leading international teams. But, that was another time where I decided to take a sabbatical and then bet on myself, founding my first organization. So when I look back, I would just can tell myself, even on the scariest days, that betting on myself is a good bet.
It's so true. And I think we oftentimes think that like we have to look out for somebody else who's going to save us. Like, actually, you bet on yourself. Like I always say, bet on the Black woman. I always will.
Well, I say the same thing, even in investors, when we talk about the capital access gap, we're trying to always think about how do we convince someone else to invest in us. I'm like, we're the investors we've been waiting for, right? Like you don't have to wait to get rich to do an angel investment. You're $500 to one entrepreneur might be everything to them in that moment. I write larger checks, but it's all relative to where an entrepreneur is. Like we, Black and brown people, we can close the capital access gap.
Well, yeah, and I think it's, knowledge is the key on this one, because I think a lot of folks don't realize, okay, all right, if you want to be an angel, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, all of y'all who are working for those great big corporate jobs where you're making a, 250, 300 a year, hello, you can be an angel. There you go. And getting that knowledge down into the weeds. It's like, I know you love your Louboutins, so, if you bought 3 pairs of those, that's, $2,500. $2,500 to a new founder could be huge. So
Absolutely.
There's lots of things. So, as you are now, busy doing all this work in the midst of a pandemic, how has COVID affected what you do?
COVID has become, when I started, I would just say with New Profit and working on the future of work, it was almost 3 years ago. So this whole idea of the future of work grand challenge and really focusing on, workers who will be most impacted and have been most impacted by automation. Like that's something we already believed in. What I like to tell people is that when COVID hit, like the future of work became the present. A lot of sectors that we thought were recession proof, think, the restaurant industry or think, travel and tourism, like they were hit hard. And so people who had worked those jobs, 10 or 15 years instantly like lost their job and they had to begin thinking about what am I going to do next, and they had to do that while, carrying some of their other responsibilities. And so for us and for me, specifically, it just brought even more meaning and urgency to my work. When I think about these entrepreneurs who we are like funding to invest in to do these on the ground pilots, when we talk about training 25,000 workers, those are 25,000 people who are thinking about how they're going to put food on their table, next week, this week. And so it becomes really personal. Like every time I'd hear the unemployment rate, even, last week I'm based here in Massachusetts, and I was talking to someone at the state level, and they said there's 300,000 permanently unemployed people. Like since the pandemic, 300,000 in one state. And these are people who have like not been engaged in employment for like over a year. And so that there's a lot of people struggling. And I feel inspired that we may have some promising solutions that can help in this moment. And so I feel like we're going to do good. We're working at this intersection of profit and purpose. And I just feel really good of the work that we're doing. And I feel like there's not anything more important that I could be doing with my time.
Awesome. Fantastic. So that's how it's affected you, the business sense, right? But what about you as Angela? What are you doing for your self-care?
For me, one is what we're doing right now. And I love that you sent me this Zoom link and we didn't have to put on like our cameras. I've been going real old school, right? And so doing a lot of conference calls and just giving myself a break. Early in the pandemic, I found myself on back-to-back Zoom calls and I'd look at, my Fitbit and I'd done like 800 steps in a day, whereas, pre-pandemic, I would do at least 10,000, maybe more. And so what I had to do was to give myself like grace and know that, I am doing good by the company by taking care of myself. And so that means that I need to go out and do walking meetings. That means I need to take off the Zoom camera so I can give my eyes a rest. And that means that like I have to really set some intentional boundaries now that I'm working from home. Whereas like I'm logging off by 5:30, 6, so I can have dinner with my family and be present with them so that I can like rinse, repeat, and be on the next day. And so, a lot of times as women, and just me in particular, we think we have this like S on our chest and we can do it all. I think what this pandemic has shown us, right, is that it's not possible and it's not even reasonable, right, to ask this of people. And I think that's why you have so many people who are leaving the workforce because they're throwing up the white flag. They're like, I can't do this. And I think if we could have a more empathetic like work culture, we wouldn't ask that of people. They can't do it in a pandemic. And a lot of people were just hanging on even before the pandemic, really.
It's so true. I mean, I talk about this all the time where it's like, Black women especially, have a mountain on their back and then end up having 2 more added to their backs and they still have to keep climbing. And I'm like, yeah, no, let's not do that. Like,
No.
let's remove the strong Black woman trope immediately. It's like, no, I like sleep. I like rest. I'm taking naps. Like I started following nap ministry on Instagram. I'm like, yes, that's important.
I'm gonna have to log on and look at that one. I also think, there's this in communities of color and Black women, there's this narrative that we have to work twice as hard to get as much. And many times that's true, right? I'm not discounting that at all. But like at a certain point, like when do we decide if it takes that, I'm not interested. Like I need to go somewhere else. And I think for our health, our sanity, we need to start asking those questions. Early on, in building my career, that was true. But there's this book out there that says, what got you here won't get you there. And so like at some point, when do we start working in a different way? Even though that's true, maybe we start going to other environments where it may not be as true.
But also it's bet on yourself, like what you said before. If you bet on yourself, what you really can do, then you're not actually working twice as hard. Mm-hmm. Like when I think about when I started our company, this is our 10-year anniversary. And, I'm working smarter now and not as hard for more money now.
See, yeah.
And you have to go through that to realize, wait a minute, I'm at a place where like, I accept this. I will not accept this. I will tolerate this. I will absolutely not tolerate that. And once you get to that, and once you have that clarity around that, and you find that focus, it puts you in such a better mindset because then you're not like thinking you have to do this for everybody else. And you're working for you, not to like, solve everyone else's problem.
Yeah, which you can't do. And I just want to congratulate you. 10 years is a big deal. You think an anybody's life cycle, 1, but 2, like that's the superpower, right? When you're betting on yourself and investing in what you do and what you think that you're really good at, like that's like it. That's everything. That's your superpower. And you can lean in. And to your point, you don't have to work twice as hard and it doesn't feel as hard or as heavy.
It's a journey, but you can get there. And I think, it's why I specifically talk to younger girls in business as they're coming up and being like, look, there was nobody there when I was doing this, but I see no reason why I can't help you. So like you can avoid some of the insane burnout things I had to do to get where I am.
And that's why this conversation, your podcast is so important. That's why when you think about Black Women Talk Tech, like the more that we can share our stories and make our journeys transparent, right? It's like people can make different mistakes. They can level up on their mistakes. Like let me tell you the pitfalls and be very clear with you about the good, the bad, the ugly, so that you can like make different choices if you want to.
That's it. You can absolutely do the same mistakes I made, or but you can make different mistakes that will probably be
Yes.
less painful. um, but like it's very much like all boats rise together, and none of this crabs in the barrel foolishness.
Yeah.
Like just help. Like I see no reason why not to. Like duh. Um, and I just love the work that you're doing. So last question for you. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
Yeah, I like do both?
Yes, you
So
can.
yeah, so my ask of the audience is that I would love them to check out the 15 solutions. If they Google new profit, 15 solutions for the future of work, our site will come up and they can go to newprofit.org. I'd love for them if they see solutions to help spread the word, because these are entrepreneurs who want to do good, who are really focused on helping people who are living at the margins. And so the more that we can get the word out about their work and how they're doing it, I think is going to help them rise. It's going to help, actually employ a lot of people. So that's my one ask. My one give is a book that I keep referring back to. So, there's not many books that I read twice, 3 times, but there's this author, and I just love everything she's doing in the world, Brittany Cooper. She has this book called Eloquent Rage, A Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower. I'm like, if you haven't read it, go out and get it yesterday. And the reason why I love it
It's
is,
so good.
have you read it?
Of course.
Oh, well,
I teach a class on how to find your superpower.
okay, there you go. I mean, whether you're a Black woman or not, read it, because I think the way that she approaches intersectionality and thinking about like the impact, how we show up, what we face, as women of color, as Black women, how that, lives within the intersection of policy and just world events. I just think it's just a brilliant, brilliant critique on feminism. And so I love her. She's like one of my like inspirations and people that I go to.
Awesome. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. I loved it as well. I follow her on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
So, because she's a must follow on Twitter. Yeah, wow, fantastic. So we're gonna put all the details for folks to find you online and take the 15 questions, as well as find the book. Angela, you're just a wealth of just warmth and goodness and amazing knowledge, and thank you for the good work you're doing out in the world. One day I'll grow up and be like you. But thank you for everything, and thank you for joining me on the show today.
No, wonderful, wonderful. And thank you for having me. This is like having a conversation with a friend, and I'm so glad to have you in my network.
Likewise. And that is our show.